Thanks. So actually my career in Bitcoin entrepreneurship was somewhat brief, but I did talk to many of the names in Bitcoin, Roger Ver, etc. And there's this opinion among many Bitcoiners that Bitcoin will end the state, among many surprisingly prominent names. And you know, I discovered this idea kind of late, but I think it's a pretty amazing idea, and I just want to share it with you, because if it's true, it's a huge concept, and you know, many of us believe that if there's a button that could end the state, or if you believe maybe just reduce the state to some nominal role, you would push it. But and there's this fantasy that many writers talk about, Neil Stephenson, of some magical technology that can do that can magically give the individual some power over the state, some way to evade the authority. And maybe it's a spaceship, or maybe it's a force field. And then there's Bitcoin, and Jeffrey Tucker believes that Bitcoin inevitably is going to mean the death of the nation state. And all I want to do is explain why some people believe that, and then you can decide for yourself if that's reasonable or not. So I'm a software architect. I'm much more comfortable talking about object-oriented design and database schemas, but I think this is a really amazing idea. So I just want to tell you a bit about why this might be the case. So you can get the PowerPoint, because I'll go over a lot of information quickly. So let's talk about the nation-state's origin, because it's surprisingly recent. So before the nation-state, you know, you had many city-states that were small, the borders were loosely defined. You had some empires, but they were large, multi-ethnics. They had relatively loose internal controls. The borders would change as kings and queens would intermarry and inherit certain or lose certain lands. The territory was not defined by the national identity, but by the royal household's tributes, which territories got tributes. And you had a lot of competition between these city-states for the best policies. And so in the course of European histories, we had this development where people started having this idea that people of a certain national identity, which is a new concept, should all be in one nation, one political system. And this was actually surprisingly recent. We had the American and French revolutions, we had the German Empire founded, and then we had the ultimate culmination of this idea, fascism, the idea in the total state. And I'll go over this a little bit later. So before the nation state, you did have empires, what we think of now as country, but actually these empires, they didn't have well-defined borders. They had many nationalities, many languages, and the borders would change quite often. And then we had this nationalism, the idea that the people should unite under one country, one government, and we should all speak the same language. Actually, when the French Empire, during the French Revolution, only half the people spoke French, and only a few of them spoke the French as their main language. And then we had the formation of the German Empire in the late 19th century, and this was where many of the ideas of what we call the state now formed. The idea of a strong central government, strong bureaucracy, one language, one culture, military conscription, a system of education to brainwash everybody into believing the state propaganda. And I think this is the ultimate culmination. Nazi Germany was the belief in the total state, that all people live for the state, serve for the state, are educated by the state. It's still legal to have a private school in Germany. And so now we've stepped back a little bit maybe from when fascism was in power all over the world. But we have this now idea of the nation state. And the key concepts are that the borders are sacred and the state controls everything inside the borders. We have a centralized bureaucracy which persists through different regimes, enforces taxes, collects taxes, enforces regulations. We have a military that protects the state borders. And the main point is the state has total authority over the internal economic monetary policy. And it does this in large part through a national fiat currency. But one point I want to make is what made the nation state possible? Well, actually it was a combination of technology and ideology. So we had accounting, roads, modern maps, all these things you can see the dates, they're quite recent actually. And then we have the science of public administration, and then we also have the ideology and the men of action. But without these technologies, it was not possible to communicate nationwide, across whichever nation, within a matter of days. It was not possible to have accurate accounts. So before you had double ledger accounting invented in 1494, you couldn't keep accurate accounting records. And so these technologies, it's both the technology and the ideology is what made the modern state possible. Okay, so now let's talk about money. So money changed a lot in the last 100 years. So how did money start? Money started as a medium of exchange. I don't think I have to explain to you the basics of money, but some key points is that it stores value, it gives a measure to things, and one key point is that money has always emerged organically from people when it was more useful, instead of bartering, to have some intermediate object that you could use to represent value and to exchange goods. So it's not created by governments. It's something that emerges in any society whenever it becomes more efficient to have some intermediate object that is interchangeable and quantifiable and lasts a long time, instead of finding, if I have a chicken and you have ducks and I want and I want your ducks but you don't want my chickens, and we have to go Joe who has eggs. It's much easier to have some intermediate thing that we can all use to agree on what things are worth. Okay, so that's money. So what is fiat money? Fiat money is money that's not backed by an asset. And so this is a big change in the last 100 years, where most, or basically all countries, switch from money backed by some asset, gold, silver, something else, to money not backed by anything. Money that's backed by the state, and the state's power to collect taxes and ban free market money. And so the money, the fiat money, can be printed forever, indefinitely, because there's no balance to some commodity that it has to stay in proportion to. And so what's inflation? Inflation is printing new money for the state's purposes. And there are two purposes. One is you print money and you give it to somebody that you think should receive it. And since politicians are the ones making that decision, it's politically connected recipients. Corporations, banks, military, it's a hidden form of taxation, because people are not directly aware of the government taking their money when it's simply printing it and giving it to favored groups. And also money is used to create short-term positive outcomes. Basically, the state prints money, the GDP goes up, it looks good in the short run. In the long run, it creates business cycles. So it's a form of taxation that can be blamed on somebody other than the government. And so if we look at the history of the value of money, so let's take the pound sterling as an example. You can see it's pretty, this is 800 years, from 1265 to now. And so until the 20th century, yeah, it's pretty stable, and then you have the spike. And that's the World War I, and then we have another spike at World War II, and you see what happens. Let's go to the next slide. Let's zoom in. This is the 20th century. It lost 99% of its value over 100 years. So 99% of the value of the pound was stolen. It was taken from peoples that made that wealth and given to the people that politicians thought should get it. And this causes all kinds of chaos. But you can see, same thing happened to the US dollar. I think it was like 97%. And all fiat currencies undergo inflation, because that's the purpose of the fiat currency, to allow the state to conduct monetary policy, to decrease their value. And some people say that maybe the dollar has been stable for the last 15 years. But actually, when the economy is growing, if the money supply is fixed because it's commodity currency, our productivity goes up, our assets go up, so we should have continuous deflation. So for example, we can see that the time that we need to work to earn one chicken has gone from about 3 hours to 10 minutes in the developed world. So we should see huge deflation. So not only is the government inflating our money, but there's a hidden form of inflation, the fact that we should see deflation, but even if the value is stable, it's still printing new money. So in a real currency, we should actually see the money deflating, because there's more stuff in the same amount of money. Okay, so let's talk about Bitcoin and how it's different. So Bitcoin is the first decentralized digital currency. It's actually a technological invention. It's a common ledger of transactions and ownership. And a Bitcoin is also the denomination of one Bitcoin unit. And right now that's about how much it's worth. So it meets all the criteria of money. It's durable, it's fungible, and it's divisible to very small unit. And actually Bitcoin is not just a denomination, it's also the payment mechanism that people use to exchange Bitcoins. So it's both money and it's the system by which value is sent from one individual to another. And so the value of Bitcoin is not just from knowing who has so many Bitcoins, but from the technology itself, from the payment, secure, semi-anonymous payment mechanism. And I can talk to you about how the Bitcoin technology works. You can ask me when I'm done, but that's not really the point I want to make today. But if you want me to go over it, I can cover all the details you want about how it actually works. So how is Bitcoin like fiat money? So it's not a commodity. You can't go to the bank and exchange it for gold directly. It has no inherent value, and it can be exchanged for precious metals. It exists purely as numbers and code, and the value is only by the consensus of its users. It's like fiat money, though, that it's easy to use. There are credit card ATMs. It's still experimental, and you can directly transfer Bitcoins between two people, using your smartphone. It can be used easily to transfer $1 billion or 10 cents. The cost is the same. So how is it not like fiat money? The number of Bitcoins is finite. It is mined by distributed computational effort. So there's not any central authority that creates Bitcoins. It's hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin miners, people that get paid to run on computers to process Bitcoin transactions. So it does not depend on charity. People actually are paid to process and create new Bitcoins. That's why we call it mining. And it is possible to use Bitcoin in a way that hides the origin of the funds. So you can create an infinite number of recipient addresses, and there's no trace of who created any given address. It's only when you spend the Bitcoins with somebody or tie your Bitcoins to a bank account that the identity of the user is known. So if used anonymously, and there are ways, I can discuss it, to hide the identity of the user, it can be used with complete anonymity. And one more point is that Bitcoins cannot be stolen except with the cooperation of the owner. So you cannot break into somebody's house and steal Bitcoins by violence. You cannot have a supercomputer figure out your super private key. You cannot commit fraud and have some central authority print new Bitcoins or steal Bitcoins. It's only with the collaboration of the owner, which is a little technical concept, but I can explain it if you want at the end. And it's a competitive market currency. So there are literally thousands of competing altcoins, like Litecoin and Dogecoin, and some of them are designed to be interchangeable using this new idea of pegged sidechains. So you can have Bitcoins, and you can have competing coins that exchange at a certain rate with Bitcoins. And again, if you have any questions about any of this, you can ask me. Okay, so one more point is that cryptocurrencies only work because there's a consensus of users in the market that they are useful for conducting transactions. So Bitcoin was worth nothing for the first 10 months, and then it was worth some 1,000ths of a dollar for one Bitcoin for the next 18 months. And then suddenly the value spiked up. It went to $1,000 per Bitcoin. Now it's about at $250. But the value of Bitcoin is only in the consensus of users, and it's a true free market currency. And again, there's no fraud by any central authority, and it's an intermediate P2P protocol. So the identity of the payer and recipient can be totally anonymous. Okay, so I can't talk about Bitcoin without some pretty graphs. I think it's not what's really important, but I have to show you some technical stuff. So this is what a Bitcoin market looks like. You have bids. You have the bids and offers, and so that's a if you know anything about stock trading, that's a typical market depth chart. And you can see the current price. There's a buy price and a sell price, and all that. You can do any kind of advanced market transaction with Bitcoin, as with any stock. And this is the total number of Bitcoins in circulation. And the obvious thing about this is that it's a pretty flat. Actually, there's a slight curve because it will hit a maximum in like 2010. In a century, it will hit some fixed number, 21 million. But otherwise, number of Bitcoins mined every 10 minutes is almost constant, which is obviously what you want in a currency for the value to be highly predictable. This is the number of transactions per day. So this is good, it's going up. So people, some people say it's a fad. I won't give an opinion on that, but you can see the number of transactions over time. From 0, it's going up. Now it's in the millions. And then if you measure that in USD transaction volume per day, so you can see there was a spike, but I would say this is a healthy pattern. Transactions are going up, but also there is some value, about 60 million per day average. But that's pretty good. It's worth about $3.5 billion now. But anyway, I think the real potential of cryptocurrency is seen. And I built this exchange. It's in China. You can go check it out. Okay, so now let's talk about some theory. Market versus the state. And I hope this is basic, but I just want to remind you of this. The market, voluntary transactions, people only trade if they both benefit from it. Businesses only succeed to the extent that people keep spending the money on them. The state, involuntary transactions, what the state does depend on what is politically expedient. Maybe politicians are benevolent, maybe not, but they always act according to what politically they can get away with. And they have no competition except by competition between different governments. So they have no incentive. Maybe they want to be nice, they want to be good, but they have no market incentive to improve services. Maybe they want people to vote for them, but that's different from a market incentive, because maybe you can get away with lying to people, but it doesn't mean you have to actually provide good service. So again, I think this is obvious, hopefully. The market system driven by the pricing mechanism. Democratic systems are driven by elections, and therefore they select for maximizing political power, because that's what politicians are successful at. That's what lets you get to the top. And in the market, to succeed, you have to organize capital effectively, and you have to get people to vote with their pockets. Politicians have to organize things to increase their power. You can read more about it at that link. Okay. So one key point is, and this I will tie into Bitcoin soon, I promise, the state is a parasite of the market. Politics feeds off the market. It cannot exist without some market. A society that forbids the market entirely will have no wealth at all, because it's market transactions that cause people to work and produce. And you can see that in North Korea. The Soviet Union, Lenin tried banning prices, and within months people were starving and dying by the millions. And he said, okay, you can have some prices, but you won't have capitalism. So governments have to have some freedom to have some power to act. If there's no market whatsoever, there's no production. So governments can print money all they want, but you have to have some production. You have to have some freedom, some prices, in order to allow the state any power. The state is a parasite of the market. So how does the state maintain power? So you might say that they have tanks and nukes and bombs and an army, but ultimately they have to pay those people. The soldiers don't work for charity, and they can go around and try to take your stuff and give it to the soldiers as payment. And in primitive societies, that's what you had. You had empires who would invade a city and loot it, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't work in a modern economy. They have to pay their soldiers and bureaucrats and so on. So the power of the state ultimately is the power to tax and to control over the currency. Without these things, the state has no power. Okay, so now we get to the good part. End game of the state. Oh, that's exciting. So let's talk about how cryptocurrency changes the game. So there are several disruptive technologies that I'm going to talk about, and I want to make an aside first as an example. The printing press. I mean, I think you understand it solved a simple problem. Gutenberg wanted to print books more easier, but it had a huge impact on society because knowledge suddenly was easy to share. Before, to share knowledge, you had to personally teach it to your son, and so the guilds were very powerful. They were destroyed because you could read a book and learn the same trade. The church was fragmented because the Bible was not a monopoly all of a sudden. The scientific revolution, I think, would not have happened if it was not so easy to massively reproduce new discoveries and share them. So the point is that a technology may be very disruptive, and it's difficult to foresee the impact. So I want to talk about the P2P sharing economy. I think it's a very interesting, it's a very powerful idea. And so you all know Uber. If you don't, use Uber. It's awesome. I used Uber to get here from the airport. I use it in China every day. Use it in the US. Worldwide, it's a very reliable service. People, consumers, individuals who have cars offer their service. You get a ride, you rate your driver, and drivers have a reputation. You have that reputation, you'll no longer be fired from Uber. And it's a lot better than taxis. And so this is called the sharing economy. And there are many businesses now, hundreds, that have this concept of let's take people's spare time. Let's not have this large organization. Let people work for themselves. It's the software that's managing the whole process. And it started with Napster, I think, the idea of peer-to-peer. But now we're taking this P2P technology and moving it into business. And so I think you've heard of all of these. I live in China. I'm kind of isolated from some of these things. But these sharing economies are fundamentally changing the relationship and the understanding of capitalism that people have. And why is that? So in a sharing economy, everyone is a consumer and a producer. And so we don't have this idea of the abstract capitalist exploiter. If you're an Uber driver, you take in the cost, you're suddenly an entrepreneur. And so everyone is aware of the burden. When the government blocks Uber and says it's illegal, suddenly a lot more people are protesting because it's not some abstract, capitalist fat cat. Now it's your friend. Philip over here was an Uber driver. And so many more people are exposed to the regulatory burden. And so the peer-to-peer economy subverts traditional regulatory structures. Because how do you know if that car at the airport is an Uber driver or not? Well, right now they have, secret government spies who are trying to bust people at the airport for being Uber drivers. But it's really hard to know when it's distributed, it's out of people's homes. There's no central point of failure, or there's the potential for that. And so laws and regulations are being replaced by software. Software that develops by consensus, and it's embedded in software. Your bosses, if you're an Uber driver or Airbnb, is a software algorithm. So what's the impact of this? So we have invisible software that's replacing everything. It's replacing your boss. It's replacing large bureaucracies. It's replacing the need to go to an office. It's replacing lawyers when you have automated ratings. If your Uber score goes below a certain rating, the software will fire you. And you have machinery that's being replaced by software. And that's a difficult concept, but I can talk about it if you ask me, where we have rapid prototyping, we have upgradable firmware, bioinformatics, even medicine is now largely done with software. And you have mass adoption by a new generation of people who take this as the norm. This is really impossible to roll back. Imagine if you ask people, give up your smartphones. Right? The government can no longer do that. And when the iPhone came out, I had this irrational fear that it would be banned before it would be introduced, because I knew that once the iPhone was used by consumers, it would revolutionize things. And that potential for cryptocurrency was in the original iPhone, of everybody having a wearable computer at all times, being able to have secure communication. And so, we had this idea of some kind of elite, political, scientific, economic elite that makes all the decisions, and we're not really aware of how the world works. With the sharing economy, with everybody being a producer and a consumer, now we're all, I think we're discovering, many more people are discovering what is the market, what it's like to be an entrepreneur. We all have a stake in the market if we're in the sharing economy. Okay, so here's another revolutionary idea, and now we're getting into the heart of what cryptocurrency is specifically. So you can have property that is tied to a Bitcoin, because Bitcoins can be annotated. And so if I want to buy your car, I buy that Bitcoin, which can be an arbitrary value, and there's a note that this person owns a car. This Bitcoin is tied to a car. And so that is a transaction that is publicly visible, it's irrevocable, and from the basic idea you can do a lot of things. You can strongly prove the identity of somebody, because if you have the private key for that Bitcoin, you can absolutely prove that you own it. And the technology is still catching up, but it can be done so that there's no way to commit fraud. You have to know that password, which is maybe embedded somehow in your biology, but you have to know that password to prove that ownership. And now all things are becoming computers, and we have this idea of the Internet of Things. So my iPhone, it's encrypted, it knows who I am. If somebody steals it, they get the hardware, but they can erase it, but they cannot use it, because the first thing it's going to do is say, oh, I have a record that I'm owned by David, and you have to enter the password, and otherwise you cannot use it. So it's worth something in component parts, but the key chips, you can't erase my identity without destroying the main value of the iPhone. And so the iPhone right now, it can be worth a lot of money, because it's important to me, so it has the ability to have that software. But now more and more things are computers, and they're connected to the internet, and they can have a strong identity. For my iPhone to authenticate me, it must receive a strong password. And so more and more things are useless without knowing who their owner is. Okay, so another revolutionary idea, autonomous financial instruments. So Bitcoin is the foundation for some technologies that build on top of that. And you can have what's called a smart contract. So a smart contract is one which executes automatically based on certain triggers being met. So imagine this idea of a smart corporation. The smart corporation is a contract. It's a software program. It runs on the blockchain. So there is a program, the Bitcoin processing. It's actually not Bitcoin, but it's like Bitcoin. The software processing executes the corporate charter ongoing, and it pays people. It issues dividends based on some outside events. It can conduct actions, and it's a corporation, and it's running on a blockchain. And so, in case you think that's fantasy, this is one implementation. There are many. It's called Ethereum. It's a blockchain-based virtual machine, and they've implemented this concept of a corporation. It runs on the blockchain. It's based on strong identity, so we know who the participants are, and then you can write whatever software you want on the blockchain. So it's not running on some corporate computer. It's distributed in the network. The network has the software. You cannot commit fraud without controlling a majority of the network. It's software that's replacing, that's enforcing property rights, contracts, a lot of things. You can have a car loan on this platform. Okay, this is another interesting idea that cryptocurrency enables, prediction markets. And so prediction markets are a way that you can place bets on certain events. And they have a lot of interesting applications. So one example is you place a bet on a scientific constant, let's say. the atmosphere of some star. And the first person who discovers what is the atmosphere of that star receives that bet. And so now there's a market incentive for a scientific discovery. And there's papers written about how you can use prediction markets to create innovation. So public policies kind of bets. And it's interesting, if some politician says that my policy is going to create more jobs, and so the prediction market creates the bet, will this policy create more jobs? Now we're putting our money on the politician's promises. And even if politicians are not involved with this, the market is saying that here's the prediction of the outcome of this policy. And once this is widespread, once it's proven that markets are quite reliable at making predictions, now politicians are going to be held accountable for their promises. Because everybody's saying, well, this market has a history. When people put their mouth where their money is, your promise and the GDP or job level 1 year later, now you're being accountable. And then also it's a testbed for driving artificial intelligence and so on. Assassination markets is something that is very interesting. You can place a bounty on to when somebody will die. And so unpopular people will be killed off, and you can decide whether that's good or bad, but the point is that it's unstoppable because you don't know who's placing a bounty on your head. So you better not do unpopular things. And again, I'm not promoting any of this, but I think this will happen. Actually, there is a market on the Tor network called assassination markets, and there's a bounty on people's heads. And right now, there's not a lot of confidence that you can actually get away with this. But the technology is maturing very quickly. Bitcoin adoption is increasing. What happens in 30 years? Okay, so I want to review what's a nation state. Semi-sacred border, control over currency, control over internal economy, monetary supply, uniform national culture. And I think what we're going to have is mass disruption of the state. All those things are going to be up for grabs. So with money and banking, obviously, a decentralized currency outside of the control of the state is going to disrupt that. Property titles, what I describe as smart contracts, colored coins of property tied to bitcoins. There's a lot of ideas here, there's a lot of innovation happening that I don't have time to cover. Education, on the internet, you see what's happening. I was born after the Wikipedia became. I was born. I went to university. Facebook didn't exist, but still, a lot of my education came from the internet. So media is not being distributed. If you use Reddit or a lot of these websites, it's all peer-to-peer. Identity, cryptographic identity is far more secure than a piece of paper, a laminated piece of paper with your picture on it, because you can absolutely prove that you own something. So regulations are being replaced by consensus. And there's question marks here because I don't know what's coming, but I think it's interesting. So the legal system is being replaced by software and contracts. Okay, so does the market have an edge? So this is my theory, I guess. So one point is that change is accelerating. Things are moving faster and faster. And there's a number of reasons for it. One reason is that the software-powered economy has shorter. When everything is software and you don't have to build large corporations and large things, you can innovate faster. So the state can seize and be violent and try to regulate things, but it doesn't produce anything of its own. And that's a big disadvantage, a systematic disadvantage, because it's not very good at running projects. So it's not going to invent some, it has the military, but it doesn't produce the military weapons. It must source it from private contractors. So it's always a few years behind. And change is happening faster and faster. And what I think might happen is that it becomes more difficult to subvert new value structures. And I'll talk about that in a second. And so eventually things are moving faster. New values being created faster, and the state can find ways to tax it. Okay, so this is not a prediction. This is just a hypothetical. So I'm not advocating or predicting anything. I'm just saying, here's what might happen. So what's happening right now is that the technology is rapidly evolving. Bitcoin is becoming as easy to use as cash or a credit card. And we have universal adoption of wearable computers worldwide. So now the percentage of cell phone usage in Africa is going to be nearing 100%. So these people don't have any technology, any modern technology except for a cell phone, which is amazing. And pretty soon, all phones will be smart. All of them are going to have a powerful computer, a computer more powerful than this laptop in just a few years. Because that's, that's prediction at least, based on the last 50 years of progress. And it'll be easy to conduct cryptocurrency transactions as easy as cash today, because I can see the software evolving so fast. Okay, so in another 10 years, 3D printing, additive manufacturing becomes practical to produce consumer products. So currently we have tons of 3D printers, but they're not practical for producing consumer goods for a number of reasons. But they will be. So you'll be able to print literally anything. You'll be able to print an iPhone, a new heart, a car, a house, anything. It's not just 3D printing as we think of it now, it's additive manufacturing, which allows you to take the base component elements and rearrange them using nanomanipulators. So it's basically your printer on steroids is a general trend. And so there's a killer app for this. Cryptocurrency is very useful for this, because what I think will happen is that you'll have tons of piracy. People are going to say, well, I can scan an iPhone and copy it, or whatever will be popular in 10, 20 years, and there'll be an underground economy. People are printing all this stuff, they don't want to pay taxes on it, they want to, your shoes have very low technology, or purses, but they have high value. So there'll be this economy, and ubiquitous encryption, cryptocurrency, is what's going to power it. 2040s, the tax base will collapse, because all this value will be in this underground economy. And so you'll have this threshold where you'll have very high tax rates as the government compensates, but all the value will be in this black market of intangible goods. It's all encrypted, it's all done using cryptocurrency. This is where it gets exciting. Governments, are trying to seize the assets because the currency is worthless, because all the transactions are hidden. And eventually stability will reemerge because all the legal systems are now cryptographic and software. And then you can have some fun with the assassination markets and so on. Okay, so you can read about all this stuff. And I just want to make the point, there'll be really cool stuff coming up. There's amazing stuff coming, but the point is the ability to trade securely, secretly, have total anonymity, and everybody has access to this always connected device is what's really going to change things. So, you're not going to show a Bitcoin to a politician and he's not going to say, okay, I give up, I go home, you run things. But the secrecy, anonymity, cryptocurrency is what's going to enable really cool stuff. So what you can do is use peer-to-peer, encrypt your stuff, become a Bitcoin entrepreneur, promote to market ideas, join my my Liberty Meet community. Read Jeff's book. I read it on the plane here. Actually, it's very good. He has a lot of insight into Bitcoin. And yeah, well, you can ask some questions.
We have time for one question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun. I could substitute the fax machine for in your title, which was something that some of my generation thought would do the same sort of thing. Of course, I didn't much believe that. I believe this a bit more. So one has to, decide that technology may not be enough, but it can have an impact, but it may not come to the sort of end game that you're suggesting. The other thing, with respect to Bitcoin, the numbers are so small. The Fed was buying $85 billion worth of bonds every month. They could easily buy up all the Bitcoins, and Bitcoin in particular. I'm not talking about the blockchain technology, but Bitcoin or any single currency like that is going to be, really vulnerable to some sort of attack by central banks.
I'm not saying Bitcoin is it. I'm saying the technology is the potential. But if Bitcoin is it, right now it's worth 3.5 billion. The US dollar economy is worth trillions. So one Bitcoin is going to be worth, $1 million. Yeah. And that would drive the value.
What they're saying is if the Fed is buying Bitcoin, get your Bitcoin now. Okay, thank you so much, David.